Welcome to PM Express Business Edition. It was seen as a strategy to help deal with the current challenges facing the economy in terms of a debt exchange program as government works to secure an IMF program bailout. But this whole exercise has been saddled with a lot of problems, as in from organized labor, and even some are saying that how government has gone about with the announcement is currently hitting the Ghana city in terms of the recent gains that have been made. But how can we better ensure that this whole debt exchange program is carried out well to ensure that we minimize the shocks on the economy, to organized labor, and even you and I? Well, on PM Express Business Edition, we're looking at the debt exchange program. How can we get a better approach, or what should be the best approach the government can adopt to ensure that it becomes a win-win situation for all of us as government tries to bring down its debt levels in the next 3 or 5 years to about 55% by the year 2028. Well, all these issues wrapped up on PM Express as you engage an economist, a finance person, a lecturer, organized labor as well. All these issues wrapped up on PM Express Business Edition. Take a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we talk about the debt exchange program, whether indeed time has come to review the approach. And today, all my guests are connecting with me virtually, and none of them are in studio here. And these are times of Christmas where people are trying to connect a lot of things. Maybe today it's good to connect with them virtually. Joe Jackson is Director at Daylight, will be connecting me via Zoom. Professor Lord Mensah is a finance lecturer. Professor, that is, getting all the professors also joining us via Zoom. Joshua Nsan is the Deputy Secretary General of TUC, and also other businessmen as well. So thank you, distinguished guest, and thank you for connecting. Let me first start with Joshua Nsan, because something that has happened today has given different meaning to this whole debt exchange program, and he's the Deputy General Secretary of the Trades Union Congress. Thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate this so much. So one would ask that now that government has met your demand, what is next?
Thank you very much, my brother, and good evening to your cherished viewers. Yes, today, I'd say today is a very great day for us because our demand for exemption from the debt exchange program has been granted finally by the government. So you say today is a win-win for workers of this country and also for the government of this very country. What we are looking forward to is to inform our members that our intended strike action, nationwide strike action, slated for 27th of this month is now called off because we have been granted what we were looking for. So you use the means by which we inform them about the strike to also inform them to call off the strike. So we are urging all workers to go back to work on the 27th of December. The strike is now called off because you have gotten what we demanded from the government.
Ms. Ansah, I will call quickly for, and I'll come back to whether, I know TUC is fighting for the cause of workers and protection of their pension funds, which is very, very critical. But also, some will say that, have you also taken into consideration the current challenges that the economy is going through and whether this could come at a cost as well to the economy?
Really, we have done both negatives and the positive of the issue. I must be frank with you, the crisis in this country were created by somebody and not the workers. As for Ghanaian workers, we have been sacrificing all these years. And for the past years we have been in this country, you have never heard or seen labor behaving the way we have behaved this time. Because we have always taken the country first. But that has also not given us any positive results. So we think that for now, we don't have to actually allow the poor people to pay for something that was not created by them. And pensions in Ghana is for everyone. Once you are an employee of this country, definitely one day, you retire and you go for your pensions. At the moment, the pensions our pensioners are collecting is nothing to write home about. And if that one is even nothing to write home about, and this very one is also going to be taught by the government as part of this debt exchange program, the dire consequences is not good for employees and employees of this very country. That is why we stood up against that if government want to do any exchange program, then it should exempt our pensions from that fund. And lo and behold, government has listened, and today it has been announced that our pensions have been exempted from it.
The finance minister in his address today talked about the fact that, well, this will come at a cost. Is Labour prepared for that cost that this will come with?
Yes, sir. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here, sir. Yeah, I can hear you, sir. I can hear you.
Yes, he said it's coming at a cost. That cost will be later known by everyone, how much it's going to cost the country. And together we all work and find alternatives. There are so many options that we can fill in that gap. If we have said it now and then that there are so many options for government, government must prioritize its projects that he has started doing and he wants to start. Government must also look at the size of the government. Government must also look at how our taxes are collected in this country. If all these things are properly checked, we don't need to go to IMF. You don't need to look for somewhere before you get money to actually govern our economy. So we think that there are so many options, and you are ready. We are open to dialogue. We are open for further discussions to ensure that this country is brought back to stability.
And does it now open the fresh page for, or that door, or that comfort room for negotiations to be fast-tracked in terms of reaching an agreement on this whole debt exchange program?
Once we have finished with the debt exchange program, I think the next hurdle is the base pay negotiations. And we are going to go in with the same spirit, and we have no doubt that you will definitely reach an agreement before the end of the year. So we are urging the government side, we are urging the Labour side to all come to the table and reach a compromise on a meaningful and a reasonable base pay for workers of this very country before the year ends. Otherwise, when you go to next year, it means people are going to take less salary than what they are taking this year, because the COLA, 15% COLA that is being paid is going to be withdrawn at the end of the year. So there are so many dynamics that come to play when you are talking about the base pay here. But people outside think that our demand of 60%, which is now 58%, is unreasonable. But I beg to differ from that. You know, when this base pay single spine was instituted in this very country, the law says that single spine salary should not be less than the minimum wage. As I speak to you, single spine pay, base pay is less, far less than the base pay. As I speak to you, the single spine base pay is 11 cedis, 33 pesos. 2023 base pay, is 14 cedis, 88 pesos. In this case, in bridging the gap, bringing the base pay from 11 cedis, 33 pesos to 14.88, it's about 31.33%. So you can see that if you go into negotiations and you want to bridge the gap and go and take anything less than that, it means you cannot even bridge the gap. And after bridging the gap, the MOU also says that the base pay must be 10% higher than the minimum wage. So if you add that 10% to the 3-something% zone, look at the inflation that is happening in this very country now. So I want Ghanaians to actually understand our situation, that we are not asking for 60% or 50% unilaterally. It is based on this few dynamics that I've actually expressed today, my brother.
Mr. Ansah, I'll come back to you about what this also means in going to negotiations, whether it will be more of a compromising approach or still the entrenched position. But let me bring in Professor Lord Mensah. He's a finance lecturer as well. And as a finance person as well, when you look at what has happened today, let me first get your thoughts on whether we could have avoided this with a more pre-consultation before this announcement of this whole debt exchange program.
Yes, good evening and good evening to our viewers out there. I mean, clearly, government took, the process for granted. And I think government took the position of we're managing the economy. And as a result of that, whatever the case may be, we may, put something out there and the people will accept it. We've been drumming of, government trying to roll out policies by engaging the people and then the people making input to it. All these years, government have seemed to be having its way by, sending projects, sending policies to the people. And it's the same manner they approach this debt exchange, forgetting that, debt is a contract between two parties. And the parties must be involved. Come to the table, and each party should be able to sacrifice up to a certain point. But then the approach was completely different. And I always say that this exercise is an economic exercise. It is an economic exercise that has a benefit, and it has, a cost. And the cost is what we're about to realize, that labor completely going out of, job and costing the economy so much. But the benefit is going to be that government will create that kind of fiscal space to have its way of, a free kind of economic management, and possibly be able to, deliver as expected. But then the cost is that was the signal that, the labor gave, that they're going on strike. And labor should go on strike, is going to affect economic output. So if government was to wait for that cost to outweigh the benefit that we're supposed to have from the exercise, that would have been an economic disaster. And there is a serious rippling effect. The confidence that people have in government investment will also be lost. We should look at all this possible rippling effect being the cost, and then compare it to the benefits that the government intends to achieve. And looking at the benefit, I ask myself that what is the government exchanging for this debt exchange? Government needs to sacrifice. Government needs to, give up some, projects they intend to do for it to fill in, some of these, benefits that they want to rake in from this exercise. So for me, I think they could have done better. It has to do with consultation. We wouldn't have ended up here. I believe going to the table and then crunching the numbers, reallocation and reassigning some numbers, it has come up that probably we can survive without, the pension fund being touched on the, debt estate. That is why possibly we've come to an agreement. I believe that, it will come up with certain sacrifices. If you go into the budget that was read, the way the government jumped it, what do you call it? Total expenditure from last year's 146 billion thereabout to 205 billion this year. I think government can give up some things.
But Prof, I want to come in, and I want you to put on your finance hat as a finance person as well. Initially, I had that the projection of bringing these debt drastically to about 55% 2028 included individuals. And later, they took out that.
Yeah.
Now, pension funds is also out. Realistically, do you think that putting on that finance cap as a purely finance person, it is possible that they can fast track reducing the debt numbers to that level by 2028?
Oh, yes. If you look at the allocations and the debt composition, pension funds constitute about, I think, 23% or so, compared to other, funds that goes to commercial bank, Bank of Ghana, foreign investors, and all those that, that are investing in our economy in the domestic front. So there is a way out. If you look at the numbers, like I was coming to mention that if you take, for instance, government sacrificing about, 41 billion from, pension funds as interest payment, they can realign and readjust some of the expenditure lines and make room for it. If you take, for instance, the capital expenditure, we're looking at 27.6 billion thereabout. We can reduce it. Last year, we did somewhere 15 billion. And, we didn't see any much different in terms of infrastructure in this country. If you take things like other goods, last year we're around 10 billion thereabout. This year, we're doing around 27 billion. So effectively, if you look at the realignment and rearrangement of the expenditure side, and then also possible revenue that we can rake in. And I always say that we shouldn't look at just, the expenditure, raising expenditure, and then saying that our revenue generation has always been dwindling. I mean, if you control the expenditure very well, and if you're able to, spend to areas that can feed back into production, I don't think we'll be complaining about expenditure. There's a way out, and I can tell you that wearing my finance hat, things are not that difficult. Things will not be that difficult as we anticipate.
Argument that freeing the pension funds, freeing individuals will come at a huge cost to the economy and our quest to fast track the process of reducing our debt drastically.
Well, reduction of debt does not necessarily mean that you should reduce it, drastically. You can spread it over years. Debt restructuring does not mean that you should hit a certain target within 5 years or within 6 years. Now, if you look at the structures that were provided by the finance minister, next year, 0% interest payment. Why should next year be 0% interest payment? We can find a way to build up the interest, come up with the interest a bit. The following year, 5%. Why should it be 5%? So in a way, government can, come in. That is why I made a statement earlier that what is the government exchanging for this, debt exchange?
Yeah.
What the government can exchange for this exchange is the sacrifice of some budget lines and then making room for the losses they're making now on the interest payment or the interest savings they want to make on pensions. So effectively, if you take, for instance, I mentioned capital expenditure earlier. Capital expenditure, we can sacrifice. These are discretionary expenditures. Goods and services, these are also, we have control over it. Other expenditure, we have control over all these expenditure lines, which we can make room to fill in the losses that we're going to make from the interest savings we could have made from, these pensions and, individual investments.
So it's a no-no for you when the argument is made that, listen, if we are freeing these things or exempting these things, pension funds and individuals, it will come at a cost to us.
Oh, it won't be that much of a cost. It's about prioritizing your expenditure lines and then realigning what was presented in Parliament.
I see. Let me bring in Prof. Abuteksin. He's an economist as well. And for you, looking at the heart of an economist, there's the political economy and the other economy as well. For you, do you think that this is a win-win for the economy going forward, or it's again rolling back and going forward with some challenges as well?
Okay, thank you, George, and good evening to your listeners and viewers, and good evening to my fellow panelists. I think that the whole debt restructuring issues have planned up over the last 2 weeks, and we've gotten to a point now that there are some exemptions that have come up. The labor unions have made a strong case for their pension funds to be exempted, and the government has accepted, even though it has set up a committee for them to go and discuss how they can also make a contribution towards that. I agree entirely with Professor Lord Mensah as well when he says that the government should also try to sacrifice some of the expenditure lines, but I do not agree that we should sacrifice capital expenditure. Over the years, public investment has declined, and that is part of the reason why, even though we are seeing growth, it's not generating jobs, it's not generating an increase in the income in terms of the tax revenues that we collect. We need to rather concentrate on whatever savings that we make out of this debt restructuring should go into capital expenditure to expand the productive base of the economy, create more jobs, get people into jobs so that we can collect more tax revenue. And over time, I think that the expectation of government in this debt restructuring program is rather use the resources that they save into very key sectors of the economy in terms of manufacturing and other sectors in agriculture to try to generate jobs, expand the productive base of the economy with the ultimate objective of raking in more revenue, because our revenue target should now, as we project into the future, if our debts will come to a very sustainable level, it will be hitting the threshold of between 22 and 25% of GDP. How do we get that? We can only do that when the economy is expanding. And so the fact that Ghana has growth, but we are not seeing that in domestic revenue, is partly because of the fact that more of the growth has come from expenditure that doesn't expand the productive base of our economy, and therefore makes it difficult for us. Don't forget that for us to sustain our debt as well, our economy needs to expand to generate more output for us to pay our debt. So when you ask me as an economist, yes, I'm very concerned about the impact this will have, of course, in terms of the economic impact. What is going to be the impact when we talk about credit conditions after the restructuring? How those who are affected by this debt restructuring going to behave in future towards buying government debt instruments? And definitely the impact of this new dimensions where individuals have been taken out of the program, the trade unions have also been taken out of the pension funds, will mean that if we need to clear the 137 billion, as we sought to do, and move them into these new bonds, taking out the pension funds will mean that the rest of the entity, especially the financial sector, will have to carry a heavy load. And the cost, if we are not very careful in recapitalizing the banks and providing liquidity support to them, would have adverse effects on our domestic financial system. And certainly will also have implications for central bank monetary policy. So it's important that we look at how best we can come up with minimizing the potential impact of this debt restructuring on the economy. And I'm excited that the government has agreed with labor unions. And one thing that was critical, and I think that it failed to happen at the initial stages, was the fair and transparent process that is normally required in such debt restructuring, where the government has to engage the creditors and transparently do this so that they all come to an agreement. I think that there was a leakage somehow of some of the interactions that went on. And I think that's why it forced the government to come out to clearly announce it. But it's important, like I have said over the weeks, that we get a buy-in from those who are going to be having to pay the cost. And most importantly, for the government to show that it is also being part of the whole issue that is going on. Because in any case, it's all about the deficits that has ballooned over the years and led to our debts getting to that high levels. And so the expenditure levels, rationalize the expenditure is very key. That is why I was excited when the parliament didn't approve the budget for the cathedral. I'm a Christian. I believe that Ghana should build an edifice to the glory of God, but not in these challenging times when the president had promised Ghanaians that they were not going to use the public press to do this. I mean, the number of Christians in this country can contribute to an edifice of that sort, to the glory of God. So I was excited when Parliament failed to approve the amount of money that was going to be devoted to the cathedral. And these are some of the expenditure items that we've mentioned, that in a debt restructuring, as people are asked to sacrifice, there is the need for the government to show a clear, credible commitment to also do something about the government expenditure. And we keep on saying this. It's good that we hear that the World Bank is assessing the free SHS. And there is no doubt. I mean,
but Prof, sorry, and let me cut in. Let me cut in. I mean, do we really need the World Bank to assess free SHS for us as at now? Again, is it not shifting the goalposts and delaying the process? Because one, at this time, I don't need an external partner, a development partner, to tell me that this is how I should restructure our debt or restructure our expenditure. Some are saying that we know what we have to do, even going to a fund program. It shouldn't take the IMF to tell us that restructure your expenditure to match your revenue.
I mean, George, over the last 4 years, some of us have been at the forefront of calling on government to look at refinancing of the free SHS. People can pay. There are parents who can afford to pay their kids' school fees at the secondary school. Why don't we target them and let them pay? And there's a clear, I've heard people ask, how are you going to do that targeting? I mean, the computerized system that places students in schools, even those students that come from less endowed schools and place them in some of these Ivy League schools that we have. And the system can clearly show that, because students who sit for a BCE for them to move on to the secondary school come from different schools. So if a student is coming from a school that parents are paying thousands of cedis every term for them to have their basic education, why can't they afford a secondary education that costs less than 2,000 cedis a whole academic year? And so it is something that we can do, and we don't need the World Bank to do this. And I like your intervention that you are now asking the World Bank to come and assess fund when some of us have spoken over time against this. No matter the savings that is made, it at least gives a signaling effect to everybody that, oh, government is also doing something. The number of ministers, size of government has been reduced temporarily, maybe for the next 2 years, just to see how best we can cut down on some of these expenditures and so on and so forth. I think that when we begin to see that, I'm sure that those creditors who are going to have to pay part of the cost of something that they had no hand in will be willing to sacrifice, especially if it is going to have an impact on our economy and restore our economy to the level that we expect it to be. And don't forget that this debt restructuring is a major component of the prerequisites that we have to satisfy before we can get a board approval for the reforms that we are going to undergo under the IMF and for the support, however small the money is, to show up a balance of payments, our foreign reserves. Don't forget that it is more of the assurance of credibility that comes from the reform program and from Ghana to have access to bilateral and multilateral financing support. That is key to the IMF program. And like the minister has said over the weeks, it's important that we go through that reform program to restore the economy on the path of getting back to where we were before we found ourselves in this.
Let me bring in Mr. Ansah, and for you, government has granted this first request as well, going into base pay discussions and all those things. Are we going to see a compromising approach, or still the entrenched position because it's all about the interest of workers? If I can get Mr. Ansah, Deputy Secretary General, can you please unmute, sir?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, and I'm asking that whether now that government has granted this request of yours, going into discussions for base pay and the other things as well, is it going to be a more certain approach or still the entrenched position as you seek to protect the interest of workers?
Thank you very much, George. You see, there are two issues here. The debt exchange program is separate, and the base pay negotiations is also on its own ground. What is going to happen now is that there is no entrenched position from either side. Government says it's now on the 18%, and Labour says you are now at 52%. I think that it is time for both parties to actually move on with the negotiations until we all come to a situation where workers will feel okay and the government will also feel okay. But I think that once this has been granted, that does not guarantee that it's going to be a softened ground or a compromise position for workers or whatever. Because as I said in my initial remarks, I said that going in to ask for 58% now, initially it was 60, now that is 58, is something that has basis for it. I've told you that before we can even bridge the base pay to the current minimum wage, we need more than 33% to come to that par. Then the 10% average, that is over and above the minimum wage of Ghana, added to the 33%, will send you right straight ahead to 40-something, 50%. So we did not ask for this percentage for asking sake. It has basis for the requisition. And I think that government must also reason and also know that we are not just asking because we want to satisfy or please our workers, but we are asking based on the small mathematics that I've actually done to you. We want the minimum, the base pay to be 10% above the current minimum wage. And that alone will show you a signal that anything less than certain percentage will not be accepted by the labor unions.
Mr. Ansah, I know that there is always good faith between governments and organized labor and all the rest. What measures have you put in place to ensure that government sticks to the tenets of this agreement that you signed with respect to exempting pension funds from this whole thing. And 2 years down the line, something doesn't come up and government says that, we have to do this and that.
No, really, we have all discussed the issue in good faith. We are going to keep to our faith, and we expect that government must also keep to its faith. Because any attempt for any U-turn, everybody will go U-turn, and there will be no peace in this country. So I think that once we have all understood each other, that this is the way to go to have peace in this country, and also to safeguard our pensions for us, I think both parties must respect the agreement that has been signed. And I have no doubt in my mind that government will not do anything, will not attempt to actually undermine this agreement that has been signed. We as Labour will do our best. We will do our part. Our doors are open. We are ready for any dialogue that will also help in the stabilizing. We said it several times, and we are serious about that.
Mr. Ansah, have we also thought about the ability to pay as well?
That ability to pay sometimes is difficult for us to understand, because the ability to pay is a term used when only it comes to the payment of salary or some emolument to workers. We don't see that ability to pay in other expenditure by the government. So that is something that we think that word ability to pay should not be something that should be used whenever Labour is demanding something that is rightfully belong to Labour. I believe that let us all be confident with ourselves and be truthful to ourselves and see that at this time and age of this very country, somebody is taking 306 Ghana cedis as base pay. I mean, this cannot guarantee fighting corruption in this very country. I think they must all see eye to eye and see that no, when workers are paid well, they will also put in their best, and productivity of this country is going to increase. So that word ability to pay sometimes worries me when I hear it, because it is only when we ask for a salary then the ability to pay comes from either the government or any employer. I don't think that it is right when they want to actually have their way and say ability to pay, ability to pay. If it is ability to pay, then we are also signaling that if it is ability to pay, then people also to ability to work. But I don't want us to go into that tangent. We must all ensure that both parties are satisfied in this country so that we can build the economy together.
Prof. Lord Mensah, back again to this whole debt exchange program, and even before that statement from the Eurobond creditors came out, we have heard here at Joy that the external bondholders were pushing for parity and equity. So for instance, we're saying that whatever that you do for the local bondholders, do the same for us. Again, I'll push you to the wall about putting on your finance cap. Could this approach by government scuttle the whole process? Because then the foreign bondholders also say that, well, we have invested pension funds in Eurobonds as well. Exempt it. Can you please unmute, Prof? I'll be grateful, please. Prof, if you can unmute, I'll be grateful, Prof.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you now, Prof. So I was saying
what you need to understand is that the external creditors, understanding of financial space, understanding investment is completely different from what we have in our market here. External creditor will not, call for the same conditions as pertains to the domestic market. Their understanding is clearly different. They understand the possible losses and the possible gains that goes with investment. These are astute pension fund managers. These are, astute finance house, operators and, insurance companies who have put their money here. And if you look at, the kind of premium they've enjoyed over the years compared to what they could have enjoyed if they were to invest in an environment like America, which is a safe haven for Euro bonds, they wouldn't have enjoyed, such, premium. Look, at the point where we're giving them 10%, America's investment, was around 2%. A huge difference of about, 8%, premium, which effectively the external investor has been comfortable with over the years. In fact, they like our bonds because we give them much premium and much, returns compared to what they could have earned in their environment. And they also understand that Africans' bonds, including Ghana, is characterized by risk, full of risk, political risk, I mean, all sorts of risk that goes with it. So they know very well the possible consequence. And I'm telling you that they will be prepared to come to the table. And in fact, we're going to get a good deal with them if we are able to finish our domestic restructuring very well and then get the IMF buy-in. It's not for nothing to start with the domestic restructuring, because if we start with the domestic restructuring and get the buy-in of the people, then the possible, economic environment that you need to pay these external, creditors has been already established. So if you look at some of the demands and then, the things they are issuing out from these are external creditors, they are saying that government should ensure that at least we have a very good and feasible economy. Realities and transparency must come out clearly to show that indeed, we are ready to go. So for them, I think, they understand the space more than, the local environment. And then, if you look at the external, creditors, they are more spread compared to what we have in our environment. These are investors coming from different, destinations and coming together. And I believe by now they've started forming clusters to come and negotiate with government. And because of the diversity and the way the sources coming from different directions, their bargaining power is somehow weaker. And more so, understanding the space also will give Ghana kind of a leverage. Another thing we need to understand is that until we clear ourselves and get the buy-in of the domestic creditors, we cannot go and meet, these external creditors with anything. We'll go there and our bargaining power is going to be so low that whatever will be proposed will be at a weaker side. So I will expect the government to finish what we're doing here in the local market to ensure that government gets the buy-in of the people, the economy sets its footing very well, and then we get this IMF program. And then after getting the IMF program, a certain tone, or we're looking at possibility of an economic projections, good economic projections, and then we'll go and meet this, external creditors. That should give us a leverage, and we'll have a very good negotiations with them. So all that I would say is that they understand the space very well, and I think we'll not find it difficult negotiating with them.
Prof, so it's more, let's come to the finance language and even the communication as well in all this thing. And I wouldn't try to put fire or petrol in the burning fire. When that statement was issued about the external debts being frozen, there was one line in it that has triggered something with respect to the sudden pressure on the Ghana cedi. How should government handle the communication, both to the creditors and even the general public as well, as you look at
that's a very good thing to look at. You see, communication in the financial space, you have to take it from two, aspects. One is the type of communication you put in out there, and you need to understand that in the financial space, the negative communication has, strong impact on the investor's decision compared to positive, communication you put out there. Another thing you need to look at is the timing of the communication. Now, I believe that the government rushed in a way to put out the announcement for the structures they intend to have, or the debt suspension for the external creditors. They rush in a sense that we know very well that if we go, straight to have negotiation with these external creditors, we may not go there with a strong kind of, bargaining power. And so effectively, we should have waited, to settle the domestic, creditor before, we start engaging these external creditors. So for me, the timing was very, very important. And then also the kind of information we put out there. We know very well that, yes, of course, government is in a tight corner. If we don't call out for the suspension, we may not end up, paying our creditors before the negotiations, and therefore would deepen that, would dampen the trust that they have, for our, economy. So we issued a statement, but the question is, have you done your home assignment? If you want to engage these external creditors after you've issued a statement on the suspension, what are you going with? Do you have an IMF program? Do you have any, kind of the policy credibility that is supporting you to negotiate with these, external investors? We should look at the timing of the way we put out information.
And Prof, I was surprised that, that doing my own investigation, that just that one line has triggered the current pressure on the Ghana cedi.
Yeah, obviously. You should expect that. You see, our market has now become sensitive. In times like this, a little trigger of information will start having impact. We don't joke with, information management when you are in crisis. It's very, very important. So we should be careful what we put out there, especially information that will be coming out from boardrooms, and then information that will be coming out from, other, government, institutions. Very, very important. When you are up there, you have very good, what do you call rating. And then, people are talking about your economy and all those. They're not that much sensitive as when you are slipping into the default, and especially the last mile of, default. Every little thing becomes sensitive. And it becomes so sensitive that if you don't take care, speculative drives start taking over management of your economy. So I believe we need to be careful in how we manage, the kind of information we put out there.
Professor Ebo-Texon, let's talk about going forward and how this debt exchange program is managed to lessen the shocks on the economy. For you, what should be government's approach? And now the government has also showed clearly that it is willing to give in, to move forward in getting the buy-in of the local creditors.
Thank you, George. I think that I also have to emphasize you are making reference to the point 5 in that statement that was released about the emergency measures that had to put in place to prevent a deterioration in Ghana's external reserves. It's not only a very unfortunate, it's like a poor person going to bed, and he goes to paint a very dire picture of his family's finances to get the creditors to advance more loans. This is not a time to do that. Don't forget that when a currency, the cedi appreciates, in nominal terms, our debt repayment, debt service also, especially for the external debt, in terms of the cedi value, drops down. And so it is quite unfortunate that as the cedi was gaining its strength, that statement was released. It was totally needless to make that fit point. Because like Professor Lobresa said, the speculative issues that we have with our currency are still here with us. And as soon as they heard that issue, you notice that people began to hold on to the forex that they were selling, given that the signal had been clearly let out there. So that was quite unfortunate. And going forward, I think that the communication from the Ministry of Finance should be very tactful. It should not unnecessarily raise uncertainty about the Ghana cedi and going forward, so that the currency would be able to stabilize at least, because it has its implications on our debt and then our debt service, especially of the external debt service part of our public debt. Secondly, we will need, as a government going forward, to try as much as possible to be very transparent. It shouldn't have a notice board type of approach where it decides on its own that this is what I'm going to do, puts it on a notice board, and tell creditors that go to a notice board and go and look at this is what I'm doing. Yes, it's voluntary, but you can choose to opt for it or go to the market and mark down to the market values. That is totally unacceptable. One of the cardinal principles of a debt restructuring that is very successful and that is done with minimal cost, economic, political cost to the economy, is when the engagement is done in a very constructive and very engaging and transparent manner. So the way forward for government, and I'm happy. I mean, the discussion with the TUC clearly got to the point that the government said, okay, that's fine, we can listen to you. Let's go and sit there and see how best we can also take a look at other things that we need to. Because as we speak, the TLC are also looking for an increase in pay. And will the government be able to sustain that, given that the pension funds have been taken away? How much can we save out of that, and so on and so forth? So I think that the way forward, and it's something that the government's communication to do, is clearly to tell Ghanaians that we all are going to have to contribute to this debt restructuring and economic mess. Entirely not our fault, and like Mr. Hassan said, we're not part of those who made the decision to go borrowing and having KK parties after they got the money. But we are going to have to pay for it. And it should be clear to the government that whatever you do, the government should show that commitment to also do something about reducing government expenditure. And that is very clear, because when they show that promise, it becomes easier for them to convince the other side. Have to sacrifice some of their returns, their investment for us to be able to get out of this crisis, and that is very important.
Mr. Ansah, in 30 seconds, your final words as you try and wrap up. In 30 seconds, please. Mr. Ansah, if you can hear me, just pick in your last thought, please. 30 seconds.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you in 30 seconds.
Yes,
your final words.
Thank you very much, George. Yes, I think that all what I will say is that we thank God that both parties have kept faith and government has listened to our demand. And we are going to keep faith to the communique or the MOU signed between both parties. But we are also asking the government to also respect the MOU that has been signed with both parties, and also want to appeal and thank all workers of this very country for their support. And we urge all of them not to stay at home, as we said, but go to work on the 27th so that together we can build this country. Success in unity. So we are calling on workers to actually rally behind the leadership, and you will not disappoint them. You will always be there for them.
Lord Mensah, in 30 seconds, can we get your final thought in 30 seconds? Prof. Lord Mensah.
I think government should understand that, debt restructuring does not end there. Government must appreciate, that creditors also have a stake in the country and in the country's management. And as a result of that, after the debt exchange, we shouldn't limit it there. There should be that kind of agreement that will limit government and that will control government borrowing in a way, because out of the unnecessary borrowing that we've gotten to this point. So government must sit down with creditors. Creditors should make input into, the quantums and then the percentages of increase that government, can go ahead to borrow at each point in time. Other than that, we'll be going in cycles and we'll end up going to IMF and possibly getting ourselves being downgraded every now and then. So I believe government should, accept the creditors' input in its economic management so that we all benefit from this debt exercise.
Prof. Texan, in 20 seconds, can you wrap up your final
thoughts? Yes, I'll ask Ghanaians to do is that let us all support this government to try to take us through the crisis. And it is important that we meet the prerequisite for the final approval of the staff level agreement that we've had. And I'm happy that the budget has been approved by the Parliament and all of that. And secondly, we need to go through this debt restructuring and successfully do that so that we get a fund approval, because our reforms under the fund program is what is going to restore our economy back to where it is. And let us all support government as we go forward.
So all this will draw the curtain down on PM Express Business. I know the debate will still go on in your homes and in your offices as to whether it was the best approach in dealing with this problem. But I'll say Merry Christmas to all our viewers out there, and indeed a Happy New Year. My name is George Wiafe. Have a great day.